Disclaimer: this video is a joke and does not necessarily reflect reality or my own opinions. While this video itself is PG, I will be referencing an infamous literary work which is explicit. I jokingly encourage people to check it out, but you should be aware of its contents if you do so. I hope you enjoy my cursed Conlang Circus 3 entry. The Conlang which I will be presenting today, ŋeta, the language which sucks veggies obnoxiously and blatantly, is itself the product of a curse. Centuries ago, in an alternate universe, a countercultural movement raged against the monarchy of a mystical kingdom. Our protagonist, ŋeta, watched in horror as their parents were assassinated. They had been key figures in the movement. Desperate and grieving, the teenage ŋeta bargained with the deific dragon uijoδa𐐛 to turn members of the movement into vampire-like creatures. They would subsist off the blood of animals and the juices of plants. If they drank enough, they would continue existing after death. The authorities heard about this and spread hysteria about vampires, leading to many deaths. They paid the dragon to curse the language of the movement's members to be unwieldy, confusing, and lexically inadequate. ŋeta was born that day. At the core is phonology. There are 7 places of articulation, referred to as classes. There are also 5 types of consonants per class. You can see a graphic on screen. Each syllable carries 1 class and usually has 1 consonant. Rhotics of the same class may occur before a nasal or non-rhotic retroflex, but only if there's a vowel before. Speaking of, each class has 5 vowels available, but the individual vowels differ. There are a few extra rules, such as the rounding of palatal, velar, and uvular plosives before rounded vowels. Vowel types 4 and 5 are always rounded. After a uvular plosive or nasal, rounded vowels of lengths 2 and 3 are co-articulated with a uvular trill. After the uvular trill itself, any rounded vowel is trilled. Finally, words can end with a fricative, a vowel, a nasal, a rhotic plus nasal cluster, or a rhotic. Each ending offers a different meaning, which will be covered later. These endings must agree in class with their host syllable. The rhythm system is a particularly nasty part of the curse, making the grammar especially difficult. Every word/clause is 8 counts long. Counts 1 and 5 are stressed. Vowels can be 1, 2, or 3 counts long. Clauses can be 4, 6, or 7 syllables long. 4-syllable long clauses are intransitive. 6-syllable long and 7-syllable long clauses are transitive. 7-syllable clauses include an indirect object. Depending on length configuration, they can be normal, conditional, or causative. ŋeta speculates that this feature was the monarchy's way of mocking the movement's use of music to spread its messages. Like a discount itquil, each possible syllable conveys a different meaning depending on the slot it's placed in. Intransitive clauses have a subject number and person slot, subject noun identity slot, an aspect mood tense slot, and a verb slot. Luckily, the same type of slot works the same way in different clause types. The subject noun identity slot is the same regardless of whether the clause is transitive or not. The 6-syllable clauses have a subject and object number in person slot, a subject ID slot, aspect mood tense slot, verb slot, adverb slot, and object noun ID slot. Object and subject ID have the same pool of nouns, but they're scrambled around so that the same syllable carries a different meaning. The 7-syllable clauses are mostly the same as the 6-syllable ones, with a few differences. Their last syllable gives information on the relation the indirect object has, and whether the subject, object, or indirect object take up the subject and object ID slots. If the third party needs to be specified, it can be stated in another clause. Any of these clause types can be turned into an adjective clause by altering the first syllable, specifics depending on transitivity. After the first syllable, all the other syllables in an adjective clause act as adjective slots, using adjective ID. ŋeta means steer, responsibility, flexibility. Names are special, as they take up their own clause and do not have phonemic stress or vowel length. They must have 3, 5, 9, or 10 syllables. The ending is not part of the name proper, instead denoting grammatical gender. However, the grammatical gender system is very different from those used in natural languages. It conveys the speaker/writer's opinion of named parties. The special rules of each come into play when the named party is the subject of a clause or the head noun of an adjective clause. These grammatical genders are derived from the key groups/factions in the events surrounding the life and death of ŋeta. The preps are the monarchy and their supporters, marked by a rhotic/nasal name ending. Their rules are that non-phonemic rhotic clusters are always pronounced, and that adjectives attached to them are always interpreted in the worst way possible. This reflects their rigidity and the animosity which the movement had towards them. Speaking of, the Goths represent the earnest members of the movement. Their names an end and a fricative. In their clauses, non-phonemic erotics may be pronounced whenever valid and comfortable, other than all the time. Non-named parties use those rules. Adjectives attached to a named goth head noun are to be interpreted in the best way possible. Goth names are capitalized. Posers are like those who disagree with the book of idioms uijoδα𐐛 wrote and betrayed them to the authorities, leading to their execution. Their names ended in a nasal. The rules are that plosive voicings swap, and vowels of lengths 2 and 3, which are next to a nasal, are nasalized. Nasalized vowels are capitalized. They never pronounce non-phonemic erotics. Todds represent the insecure, duplicitous people who corrupted uijoδa�n's messages after their death, some going as far as to claim uijoδa𐐛 was a myth and that they were the real author of the claims. As such, nothing Todds say is to be trusted. Todd rules apply to both Todds and the clauses which focus on them. The more one discusses Todds, the more of a Todd one becomes. Their names simply end in a vowel. Vowel length is doubled unless trilled. Names never end in erotic. When quoting, the grammatical genders originally used are retained in order to preserve the opinions of the original speaker. Grammatical gender disclaimer. Please note that I'm using the term grammatical gender very loosely. Outside of this conlang, it is never acceptable to misgender someone in any way, shape, or form. There is no reference to gender in this conlang to prevent confusion on this topic. This is more of a reputation system encoded via a grammatical gender-like system. Slot info. Firstly, I should clarify what non-phonemic erotic means. Basically, any time erotic could occur and does not carry any other information, that is a non-phonemic erotic. All erotics written down in names are phonemic. Anyways, here's a rundown of some things this conlang keeps track of. Numbers, single, plural, demonstrative. Demonstratives can be objects in transitive clauses and subjects in intransitive ones. The next clause describes the demonstrative. Persons are first, second, third, and generic. Here are the aspects. Moods and tenses. In verbs, the first two vowels represent the different verbs, and the fourth and fifth vowels negate their unrounded counterparts. Relationships involving an indirect object can take a few forms. Subject, verb, object, from, to, at, alongside, via, for, indirect object. Adverbs have three parts, each determined by the class, consonant, and vowel respectively. The details are shown on screen. Word endings can be fricative, neutral, vowel, clause acts as context for next one, nasal, passive voice, rhotic plus nasal, negates clause entirely, and rhotic, clause is unsure, or yes, no question. After demonstrative, adjective clauses can begin with a vowel that agrees in class with the next syllable and agrees with person of the demonstrative head noun, using subject, number, and person rules. An idiom clause is a 6-syllable long word which is not after a demonstrative and is not an adjective clause. It begins with a vowel, and the subject and ID and object ID have the same syllable but are not the same noun. Used as shorthand for abstract advice/philosophical lessons from the Book of Idioms by uijoδa𐐛. They wrote it after the death of their close friend, who was assassinated when the two of them were working on a now infamous book. They had been working on their universe's version of My Immortal. After their execution and the rise of Todds, they attempted to interfere by appearing in the dreams of Goths. The monarchy found out and pressured the dragon to erase them altogether. Regretting their role in the curse, the dragon banished them to our world, where they have spent centuries learning and trying to influence revolutions and act as muses. Their travels are why the orthography of this conlang is so varied. Greek letters, Georgian, Latin, and even Deseret. There are only 5 vowel letters, since the identity of the vowel depends on the class of the syllable. Diacritics of the vowel communicate the length and stress. In some dialects, a non-phonemic glottal stop is placed between vowel counts. Another thing to note is that the rounded uvular plosives have separate letters. uijoδa𐐛 themselves is responsible for both our universes My Immortal and Twilight, though the prep Stephanie Myers ruined their holy vision. The only reason I know all this is because uijoδa𐐛 came to me in a dream and told me everything. I woke up in a fervent trance and transcribed as much as I could. I later used my notes to translate the requested excerpt of Twilight. políticos remontamos recuerdos políticos de la última sigamos para paquetes